The Cascade Valley Radio Observatory sat like a forgotten temple among the pine trees. Its massive dish pointed eternally toward a particular patch of sky between Cygnus and Lyra. Most people who drove past on Highway 39 never noticed it anymore. Even fewer knew that inside its control room, someone had been speaking to the stars for 15 years without expecting an answer. Elena Moretti stood before her console at 3 in the morning, just as she had every night since Thomas died. The coffee in her thermos had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, adjusting frequencies, checking power levels, ensuring the signal broadcast cleanly into the void. The numbers on her screen held a poetry only she could read. Coordinates woven with heartbeat rhythms, mathematical expressions of a love that refused to fade. The signal itself was simple, elegant. Thomas had helped her design it during their last summer together, back when they were both young astronomers drunk on possibility. The core was a repeating pattern based on their synchronized heart rates, recorded on the night he proposed under this very dish. Around that rhythm, she had wrapped the spatial coordinates of this exact spot, the place where they had promised forever. Every night for 15 years that promise traveled outward at the speed of light, reaching farther and farther into the galaxy. She knew it was irrational. Thomas was gone, killed in a hiking accident 3 months before their wedding. The signal would never bring him back, but stopping felt like betrayal, like admitting he had truly disappeared. So she kept transmitting, kept her vigil, kept speaking into the silence. The sound of tires on gravel broke her concentration. Elena glanced at the security monitor and frowned. A government van sat in the parking area, and a young man in a rumpled jacket was climbing out, carrying a metal briefcase. She checked her watch. 3:17 in the morning. Official decommission notices came at reasonable hours, not in the dead of night. She met him at the door, arms crossed. "We're closed. Come back at 9. The man held up an identification badge. Marcus Reeves, Department of Space Communications, Engineering Division. Ms. Moretti, I apologize for the hour. I drove straight from Seattle because this couldn't wait." His voice carried an urgency that made her pause. "I'm here about your transmission. The one you've been broadcasting for 15 years. Elena's stomach tightened. "The decommission order isn't effective until next month. I have legal right to continue until then." "I'm not here to shut you down," Marcus said quietly, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "I'm here because someone answered. Actually, thousands of someone's answered. And the government has been hiding it from you." The pine trees whispered in the wind. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called. Elena stared at this stranger on her doorstep, clutching his briefcase like it contained explosives. Her hand trembled slightly as she stepped aside. "You'd better come in." Marcus followed Elena into the control room, his eyes widening at the vintage equipment humming along the walls. Oscilloscopes traced green waves across dark screens. Magnetic tape reels turned slowly, recording data that no one but Elena ever reviewed. The air smelled of electronics, old coffee, and something else. The particular loneliness of a place where one person had spent too many nights alone. "Show me," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marcus set his briefcase on the console and opened it carefully, as if handling something sacred. Inside were data drives, printed spectrograms, and a tablet displaying cascading numbers. "I work in signal analysis for the DSC. 3 months ago, I was assigned to catalog obsolete broadcast stations before shutdown. Yours was on the list." He pulled up a file on his tablet. "Standard procedure is checking for any incoming interference that might affect other operations." "That's when I found these." He turned the screen toward her. Elena leaned forward, squinting at the waterfall display of frequencies. Among the cosmic noise, she saw patterns. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one was a structured signal, mathematical and deliberate, arriving from different coordinates across the sky. "These are responses," Marcus said softly, "to your transmission. They started appearing about 9 months after you began broadcasting. The first came from a system 42 light-years away. Then more from farther out. The government detected them immediately, but classified everything under Project Silence." Elena's hand went to her throat. "That's impossible. My signal is just personal. It's not even addressed to anyone specific." "I know what your signal contains," Marcus said gently. "I decoded it. The coordinates point here. The mathematical pattern is 2 heartbeats, synchronized. One steady, one slightly faster. Male and female cardiovascular rhythms, probably recorded while lying down together. relaxed. He paused. I'm sorry about Thomas. I read the memorial article from 15 years ago. She turned away, blinking hard. If these are real, why would anyone respond? And why hide it? Marcus pulled up another file. Because of what they're saying. We've been working with linguistic AI and xenomathematicians for years, trying to translate them. We finally succeeded last week. He tapped the screen and symbols appeared, transforming into English text. From stellar coordinates 184.7. Clause 42.3 message type. Condolence recognition. Translation, we hear your grief. We honor your bond. We will not disturb. Elena read it 3 times, her vision blurring. They're mourning with me. Not just them. Marcus scrolled through file after file. Each one was similar. Different languages, different mathematical structures, but the same essential message repeated across hundreds of alien civilizations. Some responses were simple acknowledgments. Others were complex, sharing what appeared to be their own stories of loss, translated into pure mathematics. One message from a civilization 70 light-years distant showed 2 orbital patterns that had once been synchronized, then one abruptly ending. A stellar system mourning its binary companion, consumed by a supernova centuries ago. Another, from even farther away, displayed what looked like population statistics. A thriving species, then a sudden collapse. Recovery, remembrance. They're sharing their own losses, Elena whispered. Using my signal as a template, Marcus nodded. Your transmission created something unprecedented. You didn't just broadcast a personal message. You created the first universal language of grief. Every advanced civilization understands loss. You gave them a way to express it mathematically, objectively, and somehow that made it more powerful, not less. Elena sat down heavily in her chair, overwhelmed. Why would the government hide this? This is first contact. This is proof we're not alone. Because of what else we discovered, Marcus said quietly. He pulled up a final document, this one marked with red security warnings. The aliens aren't avoiding Earth because they don't care about us. They're avoiding us because they care too much. 73 different civilizations have established what they call a sacred ground protocol. They've declared Earth a mourning sanctuary. No exploration, no contact, no interference. They're giving us space to grieve in peace. Elena stared at the screen, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. For 15 years, she thought she'd been shouting into an empty universe. Instead, she'd been heard by millions of beings across countless worlds. They hadn't ignored her. They hadn't dismissed her pain as insignificant. They'd honored it with the most profound gesture imaginable, respectful silence. They turned us into a memorial, she said, her voice breaking. No, Marcus said gently. You turned the universe into a community. You showed them that love and loss are the same everywhere. You proved that even across impossible distances, we can recognize each other's hearts. Outside, the radio dish continued its patient rotation, still broadcasting Elena's message to the stars. But now she knew the stars were listening. And in their own way, they had been answering all along. Elena spent the next week living inside the decoded messages. Marcus had moved into the observatory's small guest quarters, and together they worked through the night, translating each alien response with growing wonder. The government hadn't just hidden first contact, they'd hidden the most profound philosophical breakthrough in human history. Look at this one, Marcus said, pointing to a message that had arrived from a civilization 200 light-years away. The Kelrith Collective. Their entire species nearly went extinct 4,000 years ago. A plague wiped out 90% of their population. They broadcast their own mourning signal for centuries afterward. Elena studied the mathematical structure. It was hauntingly similar to hers, a rhythm that repeated, faltered, then continued alone. They stopped transmitting eventually. 300 years later, Marcus confirmed. But they never forgot. When they detected your signal, they recognized it immediately. They sent back their archived frequency as a way of saying, we survived our grief. You will too. She traced her finger across the translation. The Kelrith had included something else in their message. Coordinates to a memorial they'd built in space, a crystalline structure orbiting their homeworld that contained the names of everyone they'd lost. Billions of names preserved in light. They're not just offering condolences, Elena realized. They're sharing how they healed. Marcus nodded, pulling up another file. That's what most of these messages contain. Not just acknowledgement of loss, but testimony of survival. The Varn Dominion lost their entire original homeworld to a stellar event. The Thoraxes lost their ability to reproduce for 2 generations. The Quilven watched their oceans die. Every single civilization that responded has endured something catastrophic. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. For 15 years, she'd wrapped herself in Thomas's memory like armor, holding on to pain because it was the last thing that connected her to him. But these alien civilizations weren't telling her to forget. They were showing her that remembrance and recovery weren't opposites. They were partners. "There's more," Marcus said hesitantly. He opened a classified document marked with multiple security clearances. "This is why I came to you in the middle of the night. Why I risked my career bringing you this information." The document was titled Termination Order, Observatory 7, Cascade Valley. Effective date, 2 weeks from now. "The government wants to shut down your transmission permanently," Marcus explained. "Not because it's obsolete, because it's dangerous. They argue that maintaining Sacred Ground Protocol indefinitely prevents humanity from advancing. We can't expand, can't explore, can't make contact with these civilizations as long as Earth is designated a mourning sanctuary." Elena's hands clenched into fists. "So they'd rather destroy the first universal language we've ever created? Silence the one thing that's united hundreds of species? They call it pragmatism," Marcus said bitterly. "I call it cowardice. They're afraid of what your signal represents, that we're vulnerable, emotional, still grieving losses from decades ago. They want humanity to appear strong, not wounded." "But strength is in the wound," Elena whispered, remembering something Thomas used to say. He'd been studying stellar nurseries, places where stars were born from the collapse of dead matter. Creation through destruction, light from darkness. She stood abruptly, pacing the small control room. Outside, dawn was breaking over the pine trees, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The radio dish continued its eternal rotation, speaking her love into the cosmos. "What if we change the signal?" she said suddenly. Marcus looked up. "What do you mean?" "Every message we've received isn't just about loss. It's about what came after. Survival, community, finding meaning in the absence." She turned to face him, energy flooding through her for the first time in years. "What if we broadcast a response? Not ending the morning signal, but adding to it. Showing them that we heard them, that we understand, that we're ready to honor grief without being consumed by it." Marcus's eyes widened. "A gratitude signal. Acknowledging their compassion while showing growth." "Exactly." Elena moved to her keyboard, her fingers flying across the keys. "We keep the original frequency, the heartbeat pattern, the coordinates, everything that identifies it as the morning transmission. But we layer a new pattern over it, something that says, 'Thank you for giving me space to grieve. Thank you for teaching me that I'm not alone. Thank you for showing me that love doesn't end, it transforms.'" Marcus was already pulling up audio engineering software. "We could modulate a harmonic overtone. Same fundamental frequency, but with additional complexity. Musically, it would sound like a duet becoming a chorus." They worked through the morning and into the afternoon, building the new signal with mathematical precision and emotional truth. Elena incorporated elements from each alien response they decoded. The Kelrith's rhythm of recovery, the Varn's persistence through catastrophe, the Quilven's adaptation to loss. She wove them together with her own heartbeat, and then, hesitantly, she asked Marcus a question that terrified her. "Would you let me record your heartbeat too?" He understood immediately what she was asking. "Elena, I'm not trying to replace—" "You're not," she said quickly. "Thomas will always be part of this signal. But maybe it's time to show that hearts can beat again after they break, that new connections don't erase old ones." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, removing his jacket and sitting beside her. She placed the sensor against his chest, just as she'd done with Thomas 15 years ago under the stars. His heartbeat appeared on the screen. Different from Thomas's, slightly faster with its own unique rhythm. She didn't replace Thomas's pattern. She added Marcus's alongside it, creating a triad, past, present, and the acknowledgement that both could exist simultaneously. When they finished, Elena stared at the final waveform on her screen. It was more complex than her original transmission, layered with meaning and hope and the hard-won wisdom that comes only through surviving the unsurvivable. "When do we broadcast?" Marcus asked. Elena looked at the termination date on the government document. 12 days remaining. She smiled for the first time in years, really smiled, with her whole face. Right now, she said. Let them try to stop us. She pressed the transmission key, and the new signal began its journey into the cosmos. The old morning frequency, now enriched with gratitude, hope, and the revolutionary idea that grief and joy weren't enemies. They were the twin languages of a heart that dared to love completely. Above them, the radio dish sang its complex song into the morning sky, and somewhere across the impossible distances of space, civilizations that had been listening for 15 years prepared to hear something they'd never expected, the sound of healing. The response came faster than either of them anticipated. 3 days after Elena and Marcus broadcast their new signal, the equipment began registering incoming transmissions at a rate that overwhelmed the aging systems. Elena had to shut down secondary monitors just to keep the main console from overheating. Marcus stood beside her, watching in awe as the frequency display lit up like a cosmic fireworks show. They're all responding at once. He breathed. Every civilization that sent condolences is sending something new. Elena's hands trembled as she began the decoding process. The first translation appeared on screen. From the Kelrith Collective, your signal has changed. You have moved through the dark passage. We celebrate your emergence. May we now speak freely? They're asking permission, Elena whispered. All this time they've been waiting for us to say we're ready. More translations flooded in. The Varn Dominion sent mathematical poetry describing the beauty of stars reborn from stellar collapse. The Thraxis transmitted biological data showing how their species had adapted, evolved, and ultimately thrived after their reproduction crisis. The Quilven shared recordings of their new oceans, artificial and maintained, but teeming with life nonetheless. But it was a transmission from a species they hadn't heard from before that made Elena's breath catch. The Nanthara, from a system 300 light-years distant, sent a simple message. We lost our bonded 160 cycles ago. We broadcast our grief for 40 cycles before we could stop. Your signal taught us we stopped too soon. We begin again today with gratitude. Thank you for your courage. We didn't just create a language of grief, Marcus said softly. We created permission to feel it without shame. Elena wiped her eyes, but she was smiling through the tears. For 15 years, she'd thought her transmission was selfish. One woman refusing to let go, forcing the universe to witness her pain. Now she understood it had been an act of profound bravery. By refusing to hide her broken heart, she'd given countless others permission to acknowledge their own. The control room door burst open. 2 government agents in dark suits stood in the doorway, and behind them, a severe-looking woman Elena recognized from news broadcasts, Director Patricia Vaughn, head of the Department of Space Communications. Ms. Moretti, Director Vaughn said coldly, you've violated federal communications protocols by altering a registered signal without authorization. Engineer Reeves, you've violated your security clearance by sharing classified information. This facility is now under federal jurisdiction. Marcus stepped forward. Director, you need to see what's happening. The alien civilizations are... I know exactly what they're doing, Vaughn interrupted. They're swarming our planet with transmissions, and you've opened a door we specifically chose to keep closed. She gestured to the agents. Shut down the transmission. All of it. No. Elena moved to stand between the agents and her console. Her voice was quiet but immovable. You can arrest me. You can take this facility, but I won't stop the signal. Then we'll stop it for you, Vaughn said, nodding to the agents. But before they could move, every speaker in the observatory crackled to life simultaneously. The agents froze. Director Vaughn's eyes widened. A voice emerged from the static. Not one voice, but thousands, layered and harmonized. Speaking in perfect English through some translation technology beyond human comprehension. We are the civilizations of the morning frequency. We address the leaders of Earth. For 15 of your years, one of your own has spoken a truth you tried to silence. She showed us that humanity understands the most fundamental experience of conscious existence. Love and its inevitable companion, loss. We have honored her grief with distance. Now she has honored our compassion with trust. We ask, does humanity wish to remain isolated, or does it wish to join the community of those who have survived sorrow and found strength? The control room was silent except for the humming of equipment. Director Vaughn stood perfectly still, her face pale. The voice continued, gentler now. We do not offer technology. We do not offer power. We offer only what Elena Moretti offered us, recognition. The knowledge that across all the darkness of space, consciousness everywhere asks the same questions. Who did we love? How do we continue? What remains when everything changes? If you silence her signal, you silence your own chance to be known as you truly are, not as conquerors or explorers, but as beings who feel deeply and dare to show it. Marcus looked at Elena, his expression a mixture of pride and wonder. She had done something no government, no military, no diplomatic corps had managed. She had made humanity vulnerable, and in that vulnerability, she had made humanity beautiful. Director Vaughn slowly removed her hand from her comm device. When she spoke, her voice had lost its authoritative edge. What are they offering exactly? Elena turned to her console, pulling up the most recent transmissions. Dialogue, shared knowledge about how different species process grief, build memorials, maintain cultural memory. The Kelrith want to share their psychological frameworks for collective trauma. The Varn are offering artistic traditions developed specifically for mourning. The Quilven have environmental restoration techniques developed after their ecological collapse. They're not offering trade agreements or military alliances, Marcus added. They're offering what Elena gave them, emotional truth, a foundation of genuine understanding before anything else. Vaughn was quiet for a long moment, studying the cascading data on the screens. Finally, she turned to the agents. Stand down. She looked at Elena. Your signal continues. But from now on, it's an official first contact channel, which means government oversight, proper funding, and a team of xenolinguists. No, Elena said firmly. The signal stays personal. That's why it works. The moment it becomes a government project, it loses the one thing that made these civilizations respond: authenticity. They didn't answer because I was official. They answered because I was real. Vaughn considered this. Then we'll fund your independence. This facility gets upgraded, but you maintain full control of content. We observe, we translate, we learn. But you speak, agreed? Elena glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Agreed. On one condition, Marcus stays as my technical partner. Done, Vaughn said. She moved toward the door, then paused. Ms. Moretti, I came here to shut you down because I thought your grief was making us look weak. I was wrong. You've done something I didn't think possible. You made the universe care about one human heart. That's not weakness. That's power none of our weapons could ever match. After the director and agents left, Elena and Marcus stood together in the control room, watching the sunrise paint colors across the radio dish. The transmissions from alien civilizations continued to arrive, each one a voice joining a cosmic chorus of shared experience. What do we send next? Marcus asked. Elena smiled, taking his hand. The truth. That grief doesn't end, but it transforms. That you can honor the past while building a future. That love isn't diminished by loving again. It's multiplied. She sat at her console and began composing a new message, her fingers confident on the keys. This one would contain Thomas's heartbeat and Marcus's, her coordinates and her gratitude, her loss and her hope. It would say, I was broken and you honored my brokenness. You taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying the past gently while walking forward bravely. As the signal transmitted, Marcus wrapped his arms around her shoulders, and Elena leaned back against him, feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The same heartbeat now traveling at light speed toward civilizations that understood exactly what it meant. Above them, the stars began to appear as night fell, each one a sun for someone somewhere, who had loved and lost and continued anyway. Elena had spent 15 years thinking she was alone in the dark. But she'd never been alone. The universe had been listening all along, waiting for her to finish mourning so they could welcome her home. The radio dish turned slowly against the emerging stars, broadcasting humanity's newest truth. That we are strongest not when we hide our wounds, but when we let them teach us compassion. That the most powerful signal we can send into the cosmos isn't a demonstration of technology or force, but a simple admission: we have loved, we have lost, and we survive. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, thousands of civilizations received that message and understood that Earth was no longer a mourning sanctuary to be avoided. It was something far more important, a beacon proving that conscious beings everywhere share the same fundamental journey through joy and sorrow. Connection and loss, endings and new beginnings. Elena Moretti had spent 15 years speaking to the void. Tonight, finally, she understood that the void had been speaking back all along. In the only language that mattered, the universal grammar of a heart that dares to feel everything, lose everything and still choose to love again. The signal continued into the night, no longer a mourning frequency but a celebration of Thomas, of Marcus, of every being across the galaxy who had survived the unsurvivable and found meaning in the survival. And the stars, ancient witnesses to countless stories of love and loss, shone a little brighter in approval.